And the hadith says that Rasulullah entered into a room where someone was dying. And he says, وَجِّهُوهُ إِلَى الْقِبْلَةِ حَتَّى تَسْتَقْبِلُهُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. Turn him, meaning the dying person, towards Qibla, so the angels will receive him. When you read this hadith, what do you understand? Is it wajib or is it mustahab? Raise your hand if you think it's wajib from reading this hadith. I'm not going to be like Twitter, I'll be gentle, don't worry. You might read this hadith and say it's wajib. Rasulullah says, turn him towards the qibla, so the angels will receive him. Another faqih might read it with a different tone. Maybe Rasulullah walked in and said, وَجِّهُوهُ إِلَى الْقِبْلَةِ حَتَّى تَسْتَقْبِلُهُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. If you heard the second way, would you think what, wajib or mustahab? Maybe mustahab. This is one example. You know, when you open up the Risala Amaliyah, you see these masail. Do you know how much work the faqih has to put in to give you this Risala Amaliyah? You think, oh, there's no difference between, yajibu and ihtiyat wujubi. They have to go through all of these ahadith. And sometimes you have two hadith that are both authentic, but they're contradictory. What do you do? What do you do if you have two ahadith that tell you, for example, Maghrib is sunset, and another hadith that says Maghrib is when the eastern redness disappears? What do you do? See, this is when no one wants to talk, right? There's a lot involved in ijtihad. It's not a game. Now, you don't need to do taqleed if you're willing to go and become a mujtahid. If you have such a problem with taqleed, go for 50, 60 years, go to the hawza, study, and then you can say, in my opinion. But until then, you're not qualified to have an opinion. It's like me sitting with Albert Einstein and saying, in my opinion, general relativity is rubbish, in my opinion. You haven't even taken elementary physics. You don't have an opinion? So we have to know our limits. And the problem is, many of us, we don't know our limits. I read a few hadith here and there, and now I want to put the marja on trial. We have to have a bit more akhlaq. We have to have respect for ulama. While you're playing Xbox in your basement when you're 20 years old, they're studying. So you shouldn't think that you're an expert if you haven't put in the work.
The next question, I think I've seen a tweet about this before. It's a close-ended question. Can a Sayyid girl or boy marry a non-Sayyid girl or boy?
Now I know this is a sensitive topic. Before I answer the question, no one is denying that it's an honor to be from the descendants of Rasulullah. It's an honor that your great-great-great-grandfather is Rasulullah. We have to acknowledge that. It's an honor to have the blood of Rasulullah running in your veins. But at the same time, if we want to talk about what's wajib and what's haram, there's nothing wrong with marrying your daughter off to someone who's not Sayyid. You're not committing haram. Now you may think it's a big deal. You can think it's a big deal. But we're talking about, is Allah going to punish you for it? Because that's what it means if you say it's haram. Allah's not going to punish you. In fact, we have imams. If you think being a Sayyid is a big deal, how about being an imam? Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam married Hamida. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, and we identify as Ja'faris. He married a woman from North Africa. Why didn't he marry a Sayyid? Or vice versa. We have women from the Ahlul Bayt who married men who are not Sadiq. So it's an honor to be from the progeny of the Prophet, but do not turn away people just because they're not sada. If this was very important, Rasulullah would have mentioned it. He would have said, if someone comes to you who's sayyid, don't turn him away. But Rasulullah mentioned deen and akhlaq. These are the most important things. Not every sayyid is going to be pious. We have sada in history who claim to be imams. Some of the brothers of our imams claim to be imams. So marrying your daughter to a sayyid, that doesn't mean that she's safe. Taqwa, akhlaq, deen, these are the things that we have to do.
Thanks, Sheikhna. Next question is, what is your opinion about mut'ah and what makes it acceptable in our society today? Is it acceptable? What is your opinion about mut'ah and what makes it acceptable in our society today?
Now again, when there is a Quranic verse about a specific topic, and it's part of the sunnah of the Prophet, no one has a right to have an opinion. There are certain things that are permissible in the Sharia that might rub us the wrong way. I'll give you a simple example. If your father, God forbid, passes away, how would you feel if your mother got married 5 months later? Do you like that? If your father passed away, what would you say if your mother got married 5 months later, or 4 months and 11 days later? What's your opinion about that? Many of us, we don't like it, but it's halal. If your mother did that, you can be angry all you want. At the end of the day, she didn't disobey Allah. She waited, her iddatul wafat is finished, and she's permitted to get married. The point that I'm trying to make is, there are some things in Islam that might not be palpable to us. It might be difficult for us to digest because we don't understand the hikmah, the wisdom. In Islam, there are two types of marriages. There's permanent marriage and there's temporary marriage. They're both marriage, except one has a term limit. Now, I believe that temporary marriage can be used in a very effective way. So for example, imagine two people want to get to know each other for permanent marriage. There's no nikah between them. They're not mahram. How are they supposed to get to know each other and really be comfortable unless there is a nikah in place? Because chances are, let's be honest, if they're not mahram and they're getting to know each other for 6 months, do you think there were no lines that were crossed? Are we dealing with malaika or we're dealing with human beings? So in many cases, temporary marriage can be introduced and you can put stipulations on it. You can say, listen, there's no sexual activity. The temporary marriage has these restrictions, that are agreed upon by the wali of the girl, assuming she's a virgin. Certain limits are set, certain stipulations, and therefore they're not mahram to each other. They're mahram to each other. They can talk as husband and wife with those restrictions. So they can get to know each other in a halal way, and if they decide that they want to get married, they change their temporary marriage into a permanent marriage. I think this is a very, very healthy way of using the temporary marriage. And by the way, whenever the topic of mut'ah is brought up, we get attacked by different sects. Oh, you Shi'as, you guys believe that prostitution is legal. That's what they say. But do you know in Sunni fiqh, the problem is people, they don't have knowledge. They just attack. In Sunni jurisprudence, there is something called az-zawaj biniyat al-talaq. That it's permissible, according to some of the madahib, to get married to a woman with the intention of divorcing her shortly after. Now practically, what's the difference? If you want to attack temporary marriage that is contracted for a month, what's the difference between that, someone who's being open and honest, and someone who is marrying you but has the intention of divorcing you after a month? What's the difference? Practically, it's the same. So the point is that Islam is very practical. Islam recognizes that not everyone is going to be able to get permanently married because of financial restrictions, because of circumstances. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, because you know, Allah knows what He created. He knows that if there is no other avenue other than permanent marriage, people are going to end up destroying themselves. So Allah has allowed for another way to channel and fulfill this human need through the institution of temporary marriage. But again, I would caution people that temporary marriage, my dear brothers and sisters, should not become a lifestyle. Just because something is halal, it doesn't mean that it's the right thing. You know, sometimes someone may be married. Islamically, you might be allowed to. But you need to keep in mind that sometimes you will make a decision that will destroy your family. Is it worth it? You have a wife, Allah bless you with a wife. So there's no need to engage in behavior just because you want to satisfy your urges. Just because it's halal doesn't mean that it's the wise thing to do. So I think that we also have to be conscious of that. That there are a lot of things that are halal, but you also have to know your circumstances and know and be aware of the consequences of your actions.
Alhamdulillah, there are a lot of quick questions here, so we're going to try to combine some of them because they address some of the things. And clearly the purpose of this meeting is working because some of these questions are things that you normally don't hear in other places, and they're asking because they really are hurting about these things. So this is the question I wanted to ask, and I'll combine it with another one. If you have lost faith in God and the use of psychoactive drugs brings you closer to Him and helps you understand His existence, can you continue to use it? The fact that it's saying continue means that person is using it right. And also the other thing is that are there various levels of these drugs, like alcohol versus marijuana versus other psychoactive drugs?
You know, there's a verse in the Quran that comes to mind where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَاذِرًا. Allah says that every person knows himself, even if he wants to make excuses. You know, sometimes, to say that my faith is weak, my belief in Allah is weak, but when I take these drugs, I feel more connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This sounds like waswasa of shaitan. That he's trying to make you do something, against the Sharia with a religious justification. Now, if your doctor, if a qualified physician says that you need this for health reasons, then that's fine. But to use drugs because you feel that it's making you more spiritual, being high doesn't mean that you're spiritual. It must be, Bob Marley is not a spiritual person. Sometimes you might think that you're being very philosophical, but you're just high. You're not, reaching higher levels of yaqeen. So as Allah says, بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَاذِيرًا. You know yourself. And sometimes, you try to fool yourself into thinking that, I'm taking these drugs fi sabilillah.
Nah, bro.
In a similar light, this one is about hypersexuality in this society, because we live in this type of an environment where we are constantly bombarded with sexual images and peer pressure about that. How should we strengthen ourselves Islamically, and how should we deal with it?
I think the simple answer to that, and we all know that wherever you go, you walk outside in the street, you go to work, you go to school, you turn on the TV, there are sexually charged messages in everything that we see. But I think that, number one, as I mentioned in my presentation, the sexual desire is a desire that Allah created. And suppressing the sexual desire is not a long-term solution. In Islam, we don't believe that you're going to achieve nearness to Allah by ignoring these God-given desires. That we have to facilitate early marriage for our children. You know, in the same way that, you know, you save for retirement, you put money aside, you need to also put aside money for your kids', you know, weddings and marriage, because it's important. Secondly, even if you're married and you have a halal outcome, you also have to keep in mind that do not put yourself in environments where you're surrounded by people who are not dressed appropriately. You know, this idea in the Quran that's mentioned, where Allah says, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشَةً وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. Don't approach adultery. Allah doesn't even say don't commit it. Don't even approach it. Because if you approach it, you will be tempted to commit it. So that means that we have to discipline ourselves when it comes to what we look at, what we listen to, who we interact with. We can't be too comfortable with the opposite gender. You know, I know, you know, he's your second cousin and you call him Alushi, but he's still not mahram, right? He's still not mahram. You can't bend the rules of the Sharia. This is why Islam has very strict rules about how we interact with the opposite gender. You know, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen,
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى
Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen he had a habit of not initiating salam with young women. Saying salam is mustahab, right? You know, some of us, salam is mustahab. Salam alaikum sister, salam alaikum sister. He's passing out salams, right? Imam says, he exercises caution. The Imam exercises caution in initiating salam with young women, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, because he says, I'm afraid that I might find her voice attractive. So this is an example of the Imam not doing something mustahab, teaching us that sometimes, you know, you do something thinking that it's mustahab, but it can lead you to what? It can lead you to haram. So if Ali ibn Abi Talib is this cautious with the opposite gender, why are you so comfortable? You have so much control over your nafs. You know, at the end of the day, we're human beings. There is an attraction between the opposite genders. And in fact, there's even research that shows that guys and girls can't just be friends. I can even show you secular studies that have come to that conclusion. Because guys, unfortunately, they always overestimate how attractive they are. You know, girls are better at platonic relationships. But guys, did you see the way she said salam to me? It was like tajweed, right? You have a self-aggrandized, image of yourself. So there's research to show that guys and girls can't just be friends. There has to be a formality that's at place when you're interacting with the opposite.
We're really short on time, so we have time for maybe 5 questions, 4 to 5. 2 questions. Wow. From 5 to 2. That happened real quick.
We'll do just yes or no questions?
I'll try to keep it simple. This question, I think that many of us can relate to, especially the youth here who've been born and raised here. The issue with maintaining salah, daily salah. How can someone change this within themselves? Where do you begin if this is the issue you have within yourself and your connection to Allah?
So, I'll tell you from my personal experience. You know, many people might not want to admit this, but it is challenging to keep up the 5 daily prayers. You know, sometimes people are embarrassed to admit this, but you know, if you see someone pass away and they have no qada prayers, that's impressive. I'll tell you that. Because most people, sometimes they fall short. They have their spiritual lows and their spiritual highs. But I think what you need to do is, in the same way that if you have work early in the morning, what do? You set your alarm, right? You put it on the most annoying, irritating ringtone, and you put it away. And in fact, one of the best pieces of advice that I got from Ayatollah Bahjat, who passed away almost a decade ago. Most of us struggle with Salatul Fajr, yes? That's, it's almost like no. Okay, Fajr is Qadha, let me get on to the next prayer, right? We've assumed that we're just going to miss that one. Ayatollah Bahjat, what does he say? He says, pray Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha on time, and Allah will give you the tawfiq to wake up for Salatul Fajr. So putting the alarm on, having family members remind you, in the same way that when you're in the gym, it's easier to work out when you have a partner, spiritually, it's also easier to do your wajibat and avoid the muharramat if you have a partner, someone who's going to remind you, who's going to send you a text, are you awake for Fajr? Did you pray your Fajr? Someone who's going to give you that positive peer pressure.
So we had decided before that I will take on the controversial questions. Sure. Okay. So this applies not just to this center, but to many other centers. And so nothing should be taken personally over here, because I've heard this many times. One of the biggest challenges we youth face is the elderly refuse to give up the mosque politics, like prefer to run it like mosques in Pakistan or in India as such, further depriving the community of innovative programs, spending or investing the money they receive unwisely. Can you please advise on how to change the old ideologies and encourage the elderly to pave way for new and youthful leaders? At the same time, there's another related question about the women's side that not treated well.
So before I answer the question, I think I have to mention something, and that is, it's very easy to criticize our elders and tell them, oh, they're not running the masjid properly, this and that, but at the same time, we also have to give credit where credit is due. We have to respect our elders and understand that they are the ones who planted the seeds. They're the ones who built the centers. So even when we want to criticize, we have to do it with the utmost respect and know that they are the pioneers. They put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to establish these centers. So when we want to make change, we have to also do it with akhlaq. Number two, we youth, and I call myself a youth because, I'm not that old, right? We also have to step up to the plate. We're very good at complaining. We're very good at saying, oh, there's no English programs. Okay, come forward and you organize it. You step up. You make it happen. So you have to also be proactive. You can't just complain, because we're good at complaining. But have you actually called for a meeting with the board? Have you sat down with them? Have you actually given them a plan? Have you given them a proposal? I think if you do that, you'll be surprised at how receptive the elders will be. But if you're just criticizing, and you don't ever show up to the masjid, of course they're not going to hand over the keys to the mosque to you. You have to demonstrate some responsibility. So that's what my advice would be. And I think that sometimes we get so fired up that we just want to start a coup and overthrow the masjid, let's kick the board out to the street. We have to always maintain akhlaq. We have to honor our elders, because I'll tell you something, brothers and sisters. Starting a youth program that's built on disrespecting the elders is not going to have any barakah. So that also has to be kept in mind. So you have to take the community by the reins, right? You have to come forward and put the proposals together and take initiative.
So we're pretty much out of time. There is an event right after this, which everyone is welcome to attend. I believe it's a majlis in Urdu. But I'd like to give many, many thanks to Sheikh Azhar for his eloquent responses, and of course many thanks to all those who participated by submitting questions. I did get one question that said, how can we join in this community and participate in Seeking Wisdom? I would like to invite the founders of Seeking Wisdom to give a quick answer for this question. If I can have Brother Ali Zaidi, Sister Miraj Haidari, and Brother Haidar Zaidi come up here. And while they do that, a salawat for the Sheikh and for the founders of Seeking Wisdom.